Hi, this is Jane with Green Side Up. Today we are going to be talking about container planting. Now this is a subject I know a whole lot about because that is how I do my plants at home, in containers. And we'll talk a little bit about why. So, what is a container planting? It is anything that is going to be growing in a pot, a container, a contained area. Technically, a raised bed would be kind of like a container planting, but that's going to be another subject. That's as much as I'm saying about that today. Today we're going to be talking about things that you would put into pots. We'll be talking about why, the kind of pots you use, the kind of plants you can do. So first of all, what is container planting? As I just said, it is something that is growing in a container, in a pot. Now you can use different kinds of material for your pot. These are glazed pots. You can use plastic pots. The kind of pot you use is not necessarily as important as things like the size and the stuff that you put in it. There's several reasons why people do container planting. So I have got lots and lots of containers at my house. The reason that I do container planting is because I rent my house and I don't want to have to buy soil for somebody else's yard. So I put things into containers. My plants are all in containers. Very few are in the ground. That way I don't have to fix the ground. One of the reasons you have to fix the ground around here in Fayetteville is that you have a very sandy or a very clay-like soil, and it's not full of nutrients. Another reason that people like to do container planting is perhaps they move into a place, for instance, the military base that's around. They don't know who's been in that place before them, and they don't know what has been in that soil. So you don't really trust the soil, so you grow your plants in containers. Another reason that people might do container planting is because of ease. For instance, maybe you're getting a little older and it's really hard to bend down, to get down on your knees. So by raising your containers up, you can work out them like here instead of breaking your back. One more reason that you might like to do container planting is that you can change your plants in and out according to when they bloom. For instance, I have here an iris. Once my irises at home are starting to bloom, I bring them out front so everybody can see them. When they're done blooming, they go away to the backyard and I bring something else out. If something is in the garden, you can't do that. If it's in a pot, it's real easy to do that. When you are doing container gardening, you're probably going to wonder what kind of soil do you put into the pots? Well, it's pretty easy. It is potting soil. Always use potting soil in your pots. It's pretty easy, potting soil. The reason for that is that potting soil is formulated so that the little roots of the plants can kind of go where they need to go in that potting soil. It doesn't get all clumped up. Another thing that you're going to need to do if you're using pots is to do fertilizing. So in the ground, roots can go out and they can get nutrients from in the ground. But in a pot, in a container, the roots are contained just in that space. And so you are the only one who is giving them water and nutrients. I brought a couple different kinds of fertilizers. There's different kinds of fertilizers, of course, you can use. Always make sure that on the back of your package it says that you can use it in a container. So for instance, this one says new container plants preparation, what you do. So always make sure you follow the directions on your fertilizers. Use them appropriately. Some plants will require more fertilization than others because they're, well, we call them big eaters. For instance, a tomato is a big eater. It grows fast, it grows a lot, and you're going to need to fertilize that more than a plant that is slower growing. I did bring some seeds along also. So not only you can use just plants that are already potted in your pots, but you can also plant seeds. I brought, let's see, radish, lettuce, tomato, beans. All of those will work in pots. I also brought some zinnias and marigolds. Those are great flowers in containers. Corn and sunflowers, not so much. One reason is they get so tall that they just don't do well in containers. So for the most part, you can plant just about anything in containers, but there are going to be a few limitations. I brought some different pots with me today to demonstrate size, mostly. If I am doing container gardening, which I do, I like to have a larger container versus a smaller container. The reason for that is that my larger containers, number one, can hold more plants. Number two, I find that a larger container is going to hold water better, so I can water my containers once in the morning and they're good for the rest of the day. So I have here a container. These two containers would be kind of relatively the same size. You can do either a variety of different plants in a large container like this, or you could do one very large plant. So for instance, a tomato would do better in a container like this versus one like this. Something like these, you could still do either just one plant or you could do a couple of different plants. If you will notice, all of my containers have holes at the bottom. Every single one of them. We do have containers inside that do not have holes. They are not good for outside plants at all because you cannot control the water. For instance, if it rained, you know how sometimes we get 5 inches of rain? You'd get rain into this, and what are you going to do with all that 5 inches of rain? There's nowhere for it to come out. So make sure that any containers that you're using have drainage holes. I have here before me 3 different sized pots and several different plants and some seeds. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how to plant and the size of pot to use for the plant. I'm going to start with this middle-sized pot. And actually this is the only one that I have soil in right now, so you have to pretend with me just a little bit. Say that I wanted to plant some marigold seeds or some bean seeds. This would be an excellent sized pot to do that in. And I would look at my directions, how deep to plant them, how far apart to put them. I could put maybe 3 or 4, probably 3 bean plants into this pot. I could do a few more marigold seeds. But if I was going to plant the actual marigold, I would probably only do about 3 in that pot. You want to kind of have an idea of how big your plant is going to get, and that's the size pot that you would use. So for instance, I have this little bit smaller pot. This is about probably a 10-inch pot. I would not put my tomato, even though it's very small right now, I would not plant it into this size pot because I know that this tomato is going to get big. In fact, I would probably, if it was my tomato, plant it into this very large pot because I know that this pot is going to keep that tomato sturdy. It's not going to blow over in the wind. The tomato roots are going to have plenty of room to grow, and this pot is just going to work a whole lot better. If, when I plant this, I think, oh, there's a lot of empty dirt around, I could always plant something else in there. For instance, maybe some parsley, maybe some chives. So you can use more than one thing in a pot when you have a larger pot. That gets us to, combining different plants in a pot. Maybe you want to do some marigolds along with some potato vine. Now you could do, say, like a couple marigolds and a potato vine into a pot this size, and that would work very well. I wouldn't want to do too many marigolds and too many potato vines because it's just going to get way too crowded. When things get way too crowded, number one, they don't grow as well, and number two, your watering just gets to be kind of crazy and you can't keep them fertilized. It just doesn't work. Don't overcrowd things. Well, you shouldn't do that in the ground either. It's so tempting in the spring, you know, when things are little, to put so much together because it fills a space. You have to remember that things are going to grow. And as they grow, they're going to take up that space. Another thing to keep in mind is your sun and your shade. So for instance, if you have a sun-loving plant, say like a daylily, I wouldn't plant a daylily in the same pot as a shade-loving plant like a hosta, even if they both fit in the same pot. Always keep your sun-shade requirements in mind when you're doing your planting, so that you can put your pot and those plants where they're supposed to be sun-wise. One more advantage to having container planting is that you can contain the plants that like to just go everywhere. I have a mint. This particular one is a peppermint. Ooh, they smell good. Anyway, so mint grows all over if you let it. By putting it into a container, it stays in that container and you don't have to worry about it, invading the rest of your garden. So containers are very appropriate for some plants that like to wander. I've decided that I am going to plant up some marigolds and some potato vine. I've chosen this size pot to do it in. I'm going to dig my holes. I have chosen 2 marigolds, and they're going on, they're the corners. I've also chosen potato vine. This plant is going to flow over, whereas my marigolds grow a little more up. The potato vine grows down over and it fills in that spot. So I'm going to take and put the other potato vine right in here. When you plant, you want to make sure that the soil covers that whole base of the plant, the whole root system. So I'm going to make sure that the soil covers the whole root ball so that that plant is sturdy in there. Like this is the root system. I would need to get some more soil in order to have enough soil to cover that. After you have planted whatever you're planting, make sure that you water things in so that the water is running out. You want to make sure that they're moist. Now you can set your pot out wherever you want to have it and you can start to enjoy it. Generally on pots like this, on containers, you're going to need to check them every day. If you water your plants well, for instance, in the morning, they should be watered well so that you do not have to water them more than 1 time a day. And that's another advantage to doing a larger pot versus a very small pot. This plant that I have, this hanging basket, is a diplodenia. It's one of my favorite plants. I buy this plant every single year because I like it so much. Now I don't really have a place to hang it. So I take it out of the hanger, out of the basket, and I put it into a fairly large pot at my house, like this. By the end of the summer, which is like 6 months, this plant has literally filled up this entire pot. It's one of the few plants that, like I said, I religiously buy. I like it so much, and I know that it is a showpiece plant in my garden. I have lots and lots and lots of pots in my garden. Big ones, little ones, different kinds of material. But those planting tips that I've given you are basic to any kind of container planting that you're doing. If you have questions or comments on this video, please leave them at the bottom of the video. This is Jane with Green Side Up, wishing you a very happy spring and happy planting.